Today's show is a special report as we continue our coverage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, just a word of warning, this special report dives even deeper into very serious issues, so at times it will be a lot less funny than the last show, which according to many of you, was not at all. As many of you know, my last show specifically responded to Jon Stewart on his coverage of Gaza and Israel. He faced criticism from many sources. He responded in his own way.
Israel? What? Israel isn't supposed to defend itself?
Oh yeah, if Mexico bombed Texas, will we exercise
What other country is held to the same standard as Israel? That want to...
You know what?
After my last show, I received some pretty mean messages too. Like the one that called me a filthy Jew, and the one that just asked, "Are you retarded?" My favorite was the person who accused me of having a boner for Israel. And that's just unfair. I mean, yes, but only when I'm drunk and Israel's wearing those jeans I love. This conflict has become so side-based that it's hard to have any reasonable discussion about it. There's something really sad about that. Like we're losing to the hate, the negativity, the anger.
The dark side.
Look, there will always be shouters, but when the shouters get so loud that the talkers give up talking, then the handshakes don't have a chance to replace the fists. I think one of the biggest obstacles to peace is the extent to which this issue has descended into a side-based debate. It's us versus them, black and white, cut and dry, Team Edward versus Team Jacob. I'm totally Team Jacob. It's time to take the conversation away from the two extreme sides of this debate, and I'd like to do just that in a segment I like to call Jason Kessler Takes It From Both Ends. I'll start by dropping a major truth bomb. If being pro-Israel means that you support Israel's right to exist as a Jewish homeland, and if being pro-Gaza means you want the Gazan people to thrive in peace and economic prosperity, then I hate to break it to the shouters out there, but there's a huge silent middle in this debate who are both pro-Israel and pro-Gaza.
Say what?
Yes, you can be pro-Israel and pro-Gaza. We need to focus more on the things we can all agree with, and less on the things the shouters try to divide us about. For example, we should all be able to agree that life is pretty bad for the people of Gaza. They live in an overcrowded region that's repeatedly turned into a war zone. They're plagued with high levels of unemployment and a struggling economy, and they're currently living under the violent oppression of Hamas. Under Hamas, you don't have freedom of speech. If you criticize them or suggest peace with Israel, you have to fear for your life. Under Hamas, there's religious discrimination.
If you're a non-Muslim, you're a Jew or a Christian, you have to pay a protection money.
This is a Christian Palestinian woman describing how Christians are treated under Hamas.
They used to stand next to Christian houses, shoot and launch rockets at Israel, and run so that the response would come mainly upon Christian houses.
And then there's the corruption. Palestinians complain that Hamas has 1,700 millionaires among its ranks, and the leader of Hamas has a personal fortune estimated at $2.5 billion, while the vast majority of Gazans are struggling financially. One of the biggest problems for the people of Gaza is that Hamas seems more dedicated to destroying Israel than to helping its own people.
Their actions are mostly about how do we get new and better missiles to launch them at Israel instead of saying, hey, let's try to figure out how we're going to help make your lives better.
Hamas's charter explicitly calls for Israel to be obliterated. That's Hamas's stated purpose. Hamas wants control of Palestine and Israel, the whole shebang. Here's another little gem from the Hamas charter. The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews, when the Jew will hide behind some stones and trees. The stones and trees will say, "O Muslims, O Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me. Come and kill him." Some advice to Jews? Don't hide behind talking trees. Hamas has even hijacked the education system to cultivate an epidemic of hatred towards Israel.
The education minister in the Gaza Strip has confirmed that the Palestinian political and paramilitary group Hamas have added anti-Semitic courses to their school curriculum.
وأنصر على اليهود هم مجموعة من الكفار والناصرة ولا بيحبوا الله ولا بيعبدوا الله وبكرهونا.
أنا بعتقد إنه مستحيل يكون في سلام بيننا وبين إسرائيل.
وتلاجا الحجارة تنرشق عالدورية.
So Hamas teaches lies, hatred, and violence to children. Although, to their credit, their middle school performance of Fiddler on the Roof was amazing. Misinformation and hatred are huge obstacles to peace. A lot of people think this whole mess started because a bunch of European Jews came to Israel in 1948 and forcibly stole the land from native Palestinians. But that's just not true. There have been Jews in Israel for thousands of years. During the Crusades, Jews in Jerusalem fought side by side with Muslims against Christian invaders. In the 1800s, more and more Jews immigrated to the land, and by 1948, both Arabs and Jews had been fighting the British occupiers, each trying to win the right to govern themselves. This is important. It wasn't Jews occupying Arab lands. It was the British occupying areas where both Arabs and Jews had been living for generations. Anyway, history lesson aside, my point is that depending on the assumptions you bring to the table, you'll have a completely different view of the conflict. Some people paint Israel as an invading force that stole Palestinian land, and that's certainly what the Gazans are being taught in schools. But other people see Israel as a collection of struggling immigrants who fled persecution in search of freedom. Some see a strong Israeli military invading a weak civilian population. Others see it more like a heavily armed SWAT team struggling to figure out how to take out the bad guys without killing the hostages. That's why so many kind, intelligent, reasonable people can be on opposite sides of this issue. So where do we go from here? For starters, how about Hamas's charter? I mean, for me, that seems like issue number one, right? How do you negotiate for peace when the starting point is Hamas wanting to obliterate Israel? Seriously, if my next door neighbor hung a sign on his door that said he plans to shit in my fridge, I'm not inviting him over. At least not until he takes down the sign. And even then, I'm gonna look twice at the chocolate pudding after he leaves. Whether you're pro-Gaza or pro-Israel, or hopefully both, I think it would make us all closer to peace if we put more pressure on Hamas to recognize Israel's right to exist. And anybody who doesn't recognize that right is not a true advocate for peace. Let's take back the debate from the shouters. Let's focus on truth and respect. Let's denounce terrorism because it has no justification. Let's call for peace and stop inciting hatred. Let's all acknowledge that both Israelis and Palestinians deserve to have a homeland of their own. Whatever side of the issue you lean, these are things we should all be able to agree on, if we just take back this conversation from the shouters. Thanks. That's our show.